Welcome to another episode of Barman Saturdays, and this week I decided to bust out the Legendary Detectives collection yet again by taking a look at The Shadow, International Crime, released back in 1937. I meant to cover this film last week. I did watch it back then, but I just didn't have enough time to talk about it before I had to get ready for bed, so I'm trying to push this one out real fast, to make up for some lost time, even though it's going to be going up pretty late. I have to admit there's one giant elephant we have to talk about before we even dig into this movie when it comes to its story, characters, and plot and whatnot, and that's the fact that it just horribly misrepresents minorities and women. There's just no getting around it. With the female character, I'm guessing she's meant to be somewhat of a bumbling sidekick, so she's meant to be somewhat funny and fails everywhere, so that might be a bit more forgivable since it seems she's meant to be like comedic relief. In a film, where you got murderers and people going around that are safecrackers that are threatening to kill people, for putting the heat on them and whatnot, maybe you do need a little comedic relief, so the sins there might be a little bit more forgivable, but she's definitely a poor representation for women considering, she basically just makes every situation she puts herself in worse. And has some of the dumbest suggestions I've ever heard, like, we should look for clues in a cookie jar! Like, seriously? You start talking about how, you hide some stuff under your bed and whatnot, which, okay, fine, I hide stuff underneath my bed too, so I can believe someone might stuff something, relatively important underneath their bed or underneath their mattress. But who hides stuff in a cookie jar? It's a cookie jar. You put cookies in the cookie jar. At most you throw toys in there or something, something that's relatively harmless, just to contain it. Like, I put, my DS games in a lunchbox, so I, stuff the boxes, for the cartridges elsewhere, so they're out of the way. So I could see people hiding various things, in a cookie jar, but I don't think they'd hide something super important in a cookie jar. There's just better hiding spots. That'd be less obvious, because people are going to look in your cookie jar to steal your cookies! Because everyone's secretly the Cookie Monster. But the movie also has one prominent black character in a side role as a shoe polisher, and he talks very subserviently and very slowly, like he's not very bright. And this is the only representation we really have of black people in the entire film. In fact, I think he might be the only black person in the film, because despite this fact this movie takes place in the city, and there's scenes where they're at a diner and whatnot, I don't think there's any other black characters in the film. So, I don't even buy that for starters, because, it's a city. I imagine there'd be plenty of people of more recent African ancestry walking around. So, kind of ridiculous in casting, but I guess you can argue it's the times. It's a film from 1937. What am I expecting, just look at Little Rita and how it represents, Native Americans. It's just very in-your-face about it. Same with how it represents Mexicans and how they have to do a Mexican hat dance every time they mention the name of the Mexican bandit's leader's name. Everyone just stops and starts doing a hat dance every single time. So yeah, I should probably just move on, but it's definitely something to note. So if that sort of stuff bugs you and gets on your skin, a lot, I just say skip this movie. And there's other reasons you'd want to skip it too. I mean, this film, claims it's about the Shadow, a famous comic book character that was the inspiration for characters like the Dark Knight. The legendary Batman himself was inspired by this character. And the representation of the Shadow is a guy that runs a radio show and solves crime on the side because he's a crimeologist. But he doesn't have any of the skills or abilities of the Shadow from the comics. He's basically the Shadow in name only, a lot like, the American Godzilla film from, 1998? Which has actually been made fun of by some of the Japanese studios because they'll refer to it as Zilla, and there's a scene in Godzilla Final Wars where, the American Godzilla, Zilla as they like to call it, challenges the real Godzilla and gets utterly destroyed in 30 seconds by getting hit with the atomic breath. Honestly, the Godzilla cartoon was probably more representative of the actual Godzilla. They kept the same design for Godzilla, which admittedly, seems like a bad update to the character design, but I guess it does make it look more like it'd be a dinosaur, so maybe it's a bit more fitting considering the background for Godzilla. but it didn't have any of the powers of Godzilla, so they just took the name, slapped it on a movie, and then just shipped it out. Not to mention, if you're going to make a movie about Godzilla, where are the other kaiju at? I mean, seriously, I want a giant monster fight. I don't want to see the army take down Godzilla. That never works. I know, I've watched Godzilla Final Wars. It's the only Godzilla movie I've watched. I've seen the others that are available at Walmart, and I just haven't been willing to drop $50 on them. Because I'd rather buy like these for $10. As for the movie itself, it's a bit of a mess. You know, we got murderers running around trying to take out bankers so they can't, you know, finance their country for whatever reason. I think they're going to supply rebels or something like that, so they're just taking them out because they're trying to defend the status quo. At least that's how I think it was going to work, because they don't really go into a lot of the details about the financial aspects about what's going on. At least not very clearly, in my opinion. I think they drop like maybe a couple sentences about it and then just move on. So there's not a lot of focus on this, despite the fact, you know, it's the main motivation for our villains. We also have a side villain wandering around, or side antagonist, you know, that's a legendary safecracker who wants to go straight, but he's mad at the Shadow for putting the heat on him by sort of blaming him potentially for being involved in some criminal activity. So he pulls a gun on him and tells him if he doesn't clear things up, he's going to shoot him and kill him. So he wants to go clean, but he's going to murder somebody. Sort of contradictory ideas there, ain't it? But yeah, on a whole, the movie seems like it wants to be melodramatic at points, but also wants to have more lighthearted, funny moments. Like at one point, the guy that, you know, drives the Shadow around, because he has his own chauffeur that has to pretend like he doesn't know who the Shadow is, despite the fact, you know, this is a character that runs his own radio show, so everyone knows what he looks like, basically. And he comes into a scene where, you know, the heroes get caught, and he just pulls out a lighter. But it looks like a gun, but he does, after they leave the room, he reveals that it's actually, you know, a lighter full of cigarettes with a secret compartment for him, and they start laughing, you know, right outside the villain's, you know, apartment before they run off. Good thing the villains didn't think to shoot him in the back, right? Or they would have been in trouble, considering, you know, they weren't armed, I don't think, at that point. Just, yeah, as a film, you know, it just fails for the most part. You know, if you're a fan of the Shadow, you're not gonna like it because it has almost nothing to do with the Shadow. If you care about the quality of storytelling, it's just meh. So yeah, it's just not a very good film. Maybe it's representative of its day for B films, but it's just not very good. You know, I guess that's what you get when you look at an old B movie made by a studio that just didn't have enough money to really fund a good project. Till next time, then. See ya.
As a matter of fact, John, that job wasn't up to your usual professional standards, was it?
No, I done better than that when I was still wearing short pants.
Surely.
Now, I ain't squawking about the cops pinning a murder on me, but when they tries to hang an amateurish job like that Morton blow up on me, I resents it, see?
Naturally.
I'll get him. Take a general order. Effective immediately.
There you are, ladies and gentlemen. You've just had the pleasure of hearing Honest John in person.
You mean I was on the air?
You were, John, and thank you.
You dumb ox, why don't you look where you're going?